So the cliche is, even though it's not a cliche because it's true, that in the past, before the advantages of civilization, human beings were a lot more alert, a lot more um, in touch with what's going on around them, um, a lot more vigilant in a not a hyper vigilant way, but just a vigilant way, and that we had this very, very clear awareness with us the whole time. Because if we didn't, then because of the dangerous world we were living in, we'd get jumped. Something would eat us, basically. And that sounds like a cliche, of course, because we have heard it before, and it's like, yeah, yeah. But of course it was true that throughout most of humankind's history, we were a lot more streetwise than we are now. And of course it's true that we're not streetwise at all now. We're just floating around in cotton wool in this kind of support system that supports futile egoic fantasies, and that's what our society has become. It's become a support system for the ego construct to indulge in its fantasies, and reality is kept very much at bay, and we've been successful at that. Our technology has been successful at keeping reality at bay and at keeping any immediate danger to life and limb away. So there's this huge safety. We're in a big comfort zone, a big safety bubble, and we've got all sloppy, and we're useless, in other words, in that sense of the word, without meaning to say that human beings are useless, but we've been turned into a kind of a parody of what it means to be human beings, really. And that's a kind of a cliche, because we do, we do see that on various YouTube channels and stuff. People will be saying that, and then they'll move on to saying other stuff. But the point that I'm making is that we actually do have a predator. There is actually a super apex predator. So we don't have to worry about getting all soft and useless if we could be aware of this predator. So even in this modern world, especially in this modern world where there is no immediate apparent danger to us, there is this predator. There is the predator, and the predator is a supreme predator. It's the supreme apex predator, and it's fully engaged in predating, and we are its lawful prey, so to speak. So if we could be aware of that, we would certainly have reason enough to be alert, because we have to be alert if we're not to be food. And of course we are all food, but that doesn't mean that we have all been digested. We're in the digestive tract of the predator, but that doesn't mean that we still can't use the predator to sharpen our wits. Of course, once we start being aware of the predator, then instead of being so incredibly bored because all we're ever doing is thinking about super trivialities. Will I do this, or will I do that? Will I wear this, or will I wear that? Nothing that really pushes us into consciousness anyway, because none of that stuff. If you're walking down a supermarket aisle choosing between this and that, one type of fish fingers and the other, that doesn't push you into consciousness. And the same for shopping online for clothes or whatever. If you're trying to work out what you want to buy, that doesn't push us into consuming as a whole. This kind of the great thing about being a consumer, that doesn't push us into consciousness, really. What does is awareness of the predator. So the predator is, as I've been saying, thought. the rational mind predates us. It's kind of like they say about a fire, that a fire is good if you have a little fire when you can contain it and you can use it to keep warm and roast stuff. But when the fire jumps out of the fireplace and engulfs everything and becomes a inferno, then we say, oh no, the fire isn't good, the fire has become a bad master. And this is exactly the case with thought. If kept in its proper place, thought is fine. If it jumps out of the fireplace and sets fire to the curtains and the sofa and everything else, then we know it's not fine. Only we don't know it because of this amazing trick that thought plays on us. So what thought does, the trick that thought plays on us, is that it snuffs out our consciousness, it annihilates our consciousness. This most precious of things that there's nothing to describe it. There's no way to describe it. There's nothing to compare it to. There's no way to speak of it. And it snuffs out consciousness and replaces it with something which is infinitely inferior. And what it replaces consciousness with is mechanical reacting, which is a machine-like simulation of consciousness. Mechanical reacting is fairly easy to explain. So what happens is a stimulus comes along, which means a thought comes along, and that thought or trigger or stimulus triggers me to react in a certain way. Also, it's a mechanical thing. It presses a particular button and a particular pre-programmed response happens. And then I imagine that this mechanical response or reflex is my own free will, and that I am freely enacting or asserting or expressing my free will. Therefore, I have an actual life as an autonomous being. But all that's happening really is that the simulation is playing us, and it is controlling us, would be a better way of putting it. And it's controlling us so that we think we're in control, as David Bohm says. So it's not a new idea. It is a pretty horrific idea, though. And once we are in this situation of having consciousness replaced with mechanical reacting, then we have absolutely no way of knowing what we've missed, what we are missing. Because all we know is what we know, and we have no way of imagining, because there is no way to imagine consciousness or logically infer that there must be consciousness because of X, Y, and Z, therefore I must go and look for it. There's no way to logically infer consciousness. In fact, logic will tell us that there is no such thing. So that's got rid of consciousness. So when the predator predates us, it makes us unconscious, it makes us asleep. And instead of consciousness, we're living a life which was a virtual life. And I imagine that I am this person living my life autonomously, but that's all that a simulation of the machine. Or we could say that's all the great amoeba. The amoeba has absorbed me and created a kind of analogue of me, a facsimile of me that is vastly inferior. And the reason we can say it's vastly inferior is because the analogue of who we really are isn't who we really are. And what's more, the analogue of who we really are is a non-existent thing. It's a phantom, it's a hallucination. It's a mechanical phantom, mechanical hallucination. So we identify with the mechanical phantom or hallucination in which there is no free will, no genuine experience of anything, only just reactivity, and which isn't real anyway. doesn't matter how you put that. I mean, you've got to admit that is an inferior product, the lower analog of consciousness, or the lower analog of reality, because we can say that the mind-created simulation is a lower analog of reality, is vastly, hugely, incomprehensibly inferior to the original. In fact, they aren't. The words don't exist just to explain just how inferior it is, really. I can't come up with words to express that in any adequate way. So that's explained what the predator does and how the predator predates. And it explains what our fate is when we're unwary. And we always are unwary because we don't know anything about the fact that there is a predator. Because in the simulation world, there is no predator. There might be other dangers to scare us, but we have zero awareness of this particular fate and this particular possibility. We have no awareness of what we stand to lose or have lost, because the simulation doesn't allow us that awareness. So that puts us into a very blank and bland state of mind, where there appears to be no real danger. But if we were to be wary, if we were to allow the existence of this apex predator to galvanize us into actual awareness and alertness in day-to-day life, that would turn things around, and the predator would actually be challenging us or pushing us into consciousness in that case, because that is the only way to outwit the predator. Only we're not outwitting the predator in terms of outthinking it or outmaneuvering it, because that would be playing into, once we start trying to outmaneuver or outwit or outthink the predator, we really are lost, because it's actually the predator that's thinking for us and maneuvering for us, as I was saying before. So we can say outwit the predator in a loose kind of way, but we don't mean outwit it. There's a quote of Jesus, and Jesus says, "Resist not evil," which is an odd quote, because these days a lot of what passes for Christianity is based upon the idea that we have to resist evil. Resist Satan. Fight Satan and all his works. Watch out for Satan, kids. He could pop up anywhere, and so be on guard against him and fight him. That really is the message in a lot of what passes for Christianity. Now, the reason I say what passes for Christianity is because if Jesus said, "Resist not evil," and this is interpreted as resist the devil in all his works, that isn't even an interpretation, it's an inversion, it's the very opposite. So you can't take what Jesus says and make it into the very opposite and then say you're a Christian. Well, you can actually, because of course you can. People do that all the time. But fighting Satan, resisting Satan and all his works, is really a guarantee that Satan overcomes us right from the word go. Because this matter of truth versus deception, or good versus evil, or the cosmic struggle, the cosmic war between the principle of wakefulness and sleepfulness, or remembering and forgetting, or whatever way we want to put it, it's a lot more subtle than just getting it into a boxing ring and slugging it out with Satan. Obviously, it's going to be a lot more simple than that. When we slug it out with Satan, Satan is slugging it out with himself, or we are Satan, or aggression always rebounds on us. So the key is to be non-aggressive. Non-aggressive doesn't mean passive. Aggression is just pure stupid. Aggression doesn't achieve anything because we're lunging at our own projections the whole time. I see a projection of mine, I don't like it, so I lunge at it. I try and strike it or hit it. That is not achieving anything. It's a totally deluded action. Therefore, aggression isn't great like we think it is. And the other form of aggression would be where I see something that I like and I want to take it and grab it. And that is desire. And that is me seeing an attractive projection of my own and running after it, trying to secure it for myself. Basis of consumer culture, really. Running after all the good things. But that's not effective either, because those good things are our own projections. And we're never going to catch them. And when we do catch something that we thought was it, the projection is going to pop up somewhere else, and then we have to chase it again and again, etc., forever and ever until we die. So that's the kind of frustrating thing about being trapped in the desire realm, which is the same thing as the fear realm. So aggression isn't really so great. And when we talk about non-aggression, that isn't really so pathetic. Non-aggression doesn't mean pathetic and letting yourself be walked over. Non-aggression means not being taken for a total sucker, not being an idiot, not being a tool. So it means not being taken for a ride. Because whenever we become aggressive, or whenever we engage in strategies, we're being taken for a ride. So we can look at this business of aggression in terms of game playing. So in a game, as we know, there are two things. There's the thing called winning and the thing called losing. And the idea in the game is to it's up to us to make sure we win and we don't lose, so we get things to happen the good way. So the pressure is being put on us. There's pressure on us to achieve the good outcome and resist and escape the bad outcome. And because the pressure is all on us, that means we're going to be engaged in aggression the whole time. So what a game is pure non-stop aggression. I can't ever stop aggressing or trying to get my own way, trying to enact my own ideas of reality or enact my own will, because if I do, I'll lose. Which is how games work. You don't win a game by just sitting there. You win a game by getting up there and out-competing your opponent. So what the predator, which is thought, does is that he turns reality itself into a game. Reality in no way is a game. In no way is it about aggressively achieving what we want to achieve and running away from the fate that we don't want to have. That's not it at all. It's not about seeking advantage and running away from disadvantage, because that's just a treadmill. That's just us reacting to our own projections. Because in reality, reality isn't made up of advantages and disadvantages, good things and bad things, because reality's got nothing to do with us at all. And if it's got nothing to do with us at all, it's not our own projection, how can it contain advantages and disadvantages? So if we focus on advantages and disadvantages, we're focusing on something that isn't reality. And if we're focusing on something that isn't reality, we won't ever encounter reality. So we'll be trapped in this encapsulated state, which is the life of the ego construct. So what happens to us when we are living the life of the ego construct? On some level, we know we're lacking. We're lacking something very important indeed. We don't consciously work this out, but we know we're lacking it. We can feel it. And this is equivalent to what Abraham Maslow calls a deficit motivation. Our motivations come out of an unconscious awareness of a deficit that we need to make good. There's something lacking inside me. I have to go out there and get the good stuff, and then I can put it inside me, and then I won't be lacking inside me anymore. That's deficit motivation. And biologically, deficit motivation is quite appropriate and quite effective. If my stomach's empty and I'm really hungry, I really do have to go out there and get something to put inside me so I'm okay again. That makes sense. Psychologically, deficit motivation doesn't make sense because, as we all know, no matter how much stuff we acquire or no matter how many games we win or whatever status we achieve, it doesn't fill that hole that we have inside us. It just makes the hole get deeper, bigger. It just makes our hunger greater. We're trying to feed the hunger, the psychological hunger. The hunger gets greater and greater and greater. And the reason for this perception of a deficit is simply because our identity as a reaction machine, or our identity as the mind-created sense of self, is a deficit. It's deficient in something important. It's deficient in reality. So it's a big deficiency. It's a massive deficiency. And we will suffer all sorts of symptoms when we're deficient in reality. We don't have the capacity anymore to know we're deficient in reality because there would be reality in that perception, and we don't have any reality anymore because we're deficient in it. But at the same time, the bottom line is that we're driven by a deficit motivation, and that means we think we have to achieve everything, and we have to make right our situation that isn't right. So like James Carse says, we're striving to be winners the whole time. Not because this is a glorious thing to do, or it is a glorious thing to be a winner, and it is a glorious struggle to strive to be a winner. Not for that reason at all. It's because we're trying to prove to ourselves and everyone else that we're not the losers that deep down we know we are, which isn't such a glorious thing at all. But just as long as we are identified with the mind-created sense of self, or the finite game player, or this mechanical reaction machine, we are always going to be running on deficit motivation, because that's all we ever have, is the deficit of being who we're not. Okay, thanks for watching.